Welcome, Kerrie Leonard, to this Paralympics Tokyo 2020 preview. Kerrie, thanks very much for joining us today.
You're welcome. Nice to be here.
I suppose it's been a bit of a whirlwind the last few weeks. Would that be fair to say, with being selected and everything?
Oh, for sure. When I got the phone call, it was and it's been hard to actually find the time to enjoy it, if that makes sense. It's been full on ever since finding out. But I think when I get on the plane next week, that's when it'll start to hit me that it's actually happening.
Talk to me about how your family reacted and everything, because I suppose they see it through thick and thin, the good and bad times, and then you finally get this call.
They were firstly delighted. I only could tell a few people. So when I was told, they said that I could tell my family and a number of friends if I wanted to, but it had to be on the quiet side until the team announcements happened. And to be honest, you really couldn't tell anybody in your family anyway, because the second you say something, it's local parish news, and then it just snowballs into county-wide news and countrywide news. So for about a week or more, I'd only told 2 or 3 people.
Okay, and then it was announced, and everybody found out officially, I suppose. All the calls and texts, I imagine there was quite a few.
Yeah, there's been loads of texts and well wishes and cards, and basically everybody telling me to enjoy it, remind me to do that, because I often forget to do that. I'm so in the zone, and I sometimes forget to enjoy it. But I don't think that's going to be an issue this time around. I'm cannot wait to soak up the atmosphere of what a Games is.
Yeah, like, this is your first Games competing, but you've been at other Games working. I think it was at London, but it's the first one competing, so it's a bit different to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for London, I got the job in London and was there for the Olympics and Paralympics, and I'd started back at Archery a few months before London, actually. So it was kind of a joke around the office that, I'll be competing at the next Games, but it hadn't really been a plan at that time, and I just kind of continued on. I just continued on competing, just casually and for myself for a number of years, and then when it came to 2015 for the World Championships and going to that, it was only after that had finished and I finished in 9th place that I really thought about going for Games. So that was a short period from August 2015 to Rio. And then after the Rio cycle, after it getting so close, then I went for Tokyo. So it is my first time competing at a Games, but I think it'll be very similar to my experience of working in London. We were in one location. We got to go to some events, but for the most part, we were in work mode.
Yeah, well, I suppose at least you have that experience. I know it's going to be a very different experience actually competing in it, but you have some bit of experience of being involved in the Games. You mentioned you got into archery just before the London Games. How did you get into archery, and why archery?
Yeah, so with archery, it was a few years before that. Even still, there was a club that started quite local to me doing beginners courses, so I went to those and did the beginners course and stayed for a few months doing it at that point. And then I went to boarding school, so I actually gave it up. And when I went to college, which was very soon before London, that was really bad grammar, but anyway, I ran into a friend of mine originally when I started the sport, and he asked me to just sign up to the club, and that's how I got back into it at that point. So I was in college 2011, end of 2010, started 2011. I just started doing it casually, and then I dropped out of college, So for a whole year, my social outlet was going to practice, and then I had the opportunity to go to my first games in Stoke Mandeville, and that's kind of how it started. But all of it was never planned. It was just kind of a, let's try this and let's do this, and sure, no problem. So it was it's amazing how stuff snowballs.
Yeah, absolutely. Has that person been in touch with you who got you started, saying, you know, you wouldn't be going to Tokyo if I hadn't got you into it, or something like that?
No, they haven't actually. I don't think they even realized that they were the person that brought me back. But
Okay.
but it's interesting how people come into your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And come here, obviously there's a huge amount of training involved in all that, but before we go into the depths of all that, talk me through qualifying, because that can be maybe complicated for some in trying to get into the games.
Yes, so the way that qualifying typically happens is there are 3 events for European countries, for Americas, and for Asian countries. There are 3 events. So you typically have the World Championships, which offers places, the most amount of places to athletes. And then you will have your continental qualifier, so in our case, the European Championships. And then you will have a final qualifier. So I went to the World Championships in 2019 and needed to finish top 8. I finished outside of that, so then I needed to go on to the European Championships. Unfortunately, that was cancelled for us this year and for last year. This cycle, it was the top 2 from the European Championships who, in my category, that would go through. That didn't take place, so they pushed it into the final qualifier, which was a month ago. And the top 2 from that qualified. So they're the 3 in competition qualifying routes. And then there's also a last qualifying opportunity in what they call a bipartite application, which is essentially a bit like the backdoor system in GAA. So you make a case, and if they think that your case is deemed convincing enough, then you get offered a place. So that's how it typically works.
Okay, and talk to me about your qualification then for Tokyo. How did you be in the position to get the call, Will say?
Yes, so at the World Championships, I finished 17th. And so I didn't get the place at the World Championships. At the European Championships, they were cancelled and pushed into the final qualifying tournament in the Czech Republic, which took place in July. And in the European qualifiers, I finished 6th. And then at the final qualifier, I finished 5th. So just outside of the qualifying places. We had applied and made an application for a bipartite application, and then I was approved for that. So I got the phone call when I got home from the tournament, when all of the arguments had been heard, and the most I was given the place.
Yeah, super. That's great. We'll touch on training, so I suppose, because around the whole whirlwind of being selected to go to Tokyo, you still have to train, because you still, there's a competition to take part in. How's that going?
It's going well. For the last couple of weeks, I've been collecting spare equipment to make sure that I have everything, all my bases covered, so I'm not worried about it when it comes to the day on competition. I have ramped up training, definitely prioritized it. I work full time, so trying to give it more attention in my workday, burning the candle at both ends. And then from a training perspective, training at home at the facility that I have here, as well as training with my coach, getting more physio in so that I'm not, because I've increased the training, that I'm not going to jar myself up. And then also getting those psychology sessions in before I go, because from my side of things, that's one of the big factors in doing well, in my opinion, is getting the head right.
That's interesting you say that. That's because, well, it was probably always important anyway, but we see more of it, especially in the Olympics in Tokyo the last few weeks as well. Just about getting the head right and in the right space for competing, because there can be a lot of pressure and people at you and stuff like that. That's incredibly important as well, having the head right.
It is. So I've had an unusual games experience for Tokyo, to be honest. So for Rio, you need to finish the same top 8, first and third. So they switched it from 8 first to third this time around to 8 second and second. And I finished 9th, 2nd, and 7th for Rio. For Tokyo, and that was just me purely putting my energy into training. Took the year off to do that. For Tokyo, for the World Championships, and the run up to the World Championships, I was doing a master's. So I was in Dublin from leaving my house here at 6 o'clock and not getting back to the house until 8 p.m. every single day in the run up to the World Championships. So at every opportunity I had to focus on a psychology side of things, I threw myself into that, because I did not have the time to put in physical training. And for the World Championship, I actually shot, although I finished 17th, I shot my PB in competition at the World Championships. Just a silly mistake knocked me at 17th. I should have gone the next level, but that's if somebody had wheels, they'd be a bicycle. I mean, you know, there's so many arguments you can make for that. So from my side of things, psychology in a sport like archery, you're on your own, on the line, you're in your head, and you're trying to stay as relaxed as possible, because as soon as you tense up, it creates issues for your shooting. So so for me, I think it's extremely important, the mental side of things. And we are seeing that a lot more, again, like you alluded to with Simone Biles, and even with Naomi Osaka during the French Open.
Yeah.
I think. You know, you do need to have those conversations, and it's great that it is actually becoming more mainstream.
Yeah, absolutely. But it is such a key component of, it's not just all the physical training, it's that part right as well. You're a very, 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 very busy person in general anyway. You mentioned that you're working away anyway, you're training, you have the farm there as well. I think you do a bit of work there. How do you do it all together? I'm sure you have support from family though.
Yeah, how do I do it? I think if I stop to really think about how I do it, I'd stop completely, to be honest. Is this I've always had this this saying or this thought in my own mind that we live like we're standing on the coast. So I use this for talking about mental health and actually about my day-to-day life, but we're planted on the coastline, can't move, and we have waves crashing into us, and to the point where you feel like you're about to drown. You're just constantly bombarded by these waves. But if you wait long enough, if you hold out long enough, the waves subside and the sea gets calm again. So it's very busy all of the time, but it's my normal. And sometimes it'll be busier than other times, but it will calm down. And if it gets too much, I can always shout at someone to take over. There's enough people around me to be able to do that.
When you're almost that busy and you get a break from one thing, and you have this gap in time, you're almost trying to fill it again anyway, because you don't know what to do with it because you're so busy. Talking about Tokyo again, what have you been told about the setup and going over there? Because obviously it'll be different to a standard year maybe in the games with all the bubbles and everything. So what do you know about what it's going to be like over there? or do you know?
Well, similar to that, it's bubbles is what I'm aware of. We've been given briefs. I don't think I'll get to really know what to expect until I get there. To be honest, I've just been watching a lot of TikToks. I've just been watching other athletes that are over there to try and get a sense of what it's like. But yes, we get there, fly over next week, and then we're there until the tournament starts, and as soon as my event is finished, then I leave again. So it's going to be a very busy turnaround time. So there's not going to be a lot for me to do outside of competing.
Okay, yeah. And look, before I leave you go, there's a lot of IWA sport clubs across the country. The two of them not too far from here, Royal Rockets and Northeast Thunder as well.
Mm-hmm.
You would have kids at these events looking on. I know it's probably not in your periphery, but they'll be looking on at the different athletes going over, and it's very important to them because we've the Para Athletic Grand Prix taking place at the moment, all the different athletics events, and there's kids going to be watching this, and they'll go back out to those events, and they could be the next people going out. So I suppose it's important they're starting young with these clubs, and they're moving on through, but they're watching ye on the TV or whatever. Yeah,
so my advice in general for anybody who's thinking about getting into sport and para, there's so many options for kids to try. You can do athletics, you can do basketball, powerlifting. Brittany's coming, so she's great to give that face to, really. But for more than anything else this time around, compared to when I had my disability, there wasn't people represented. I didn't see anybody like me growing up. I certainly didn't have access to clubs really when I was growing up with similar people to myself. So I've gotten here in the dark a little bit, which I think is very different for kids coming through now. They have so many options to be able to look at what they could potentially do. I would say not to limit yourself to any one sport. You can try everything and find what suits, and be open to trying something and it not working and having to adapt it to suit yourself. Because with archery, you can go to a club, you can do a beginner's course in that club and get all of the equipment on loan while you're there. But it means you have to be willing to adapt it to suit you, because it certainly isn't going to work the first time around. So being open and trying everything is what I would say. After a long story.
As a leave you go, you mentioned you're flying out next week, so lots of excitement, nervousness, anticipation, I don't know, whatever it is, but how are you feeling with the last week before you go?
Yeah, it's weird. I don't really have, I'm not obviously excited, but I haven't got that overwhelming thing yet, because I still have a few more days of work to go. Still have to pick up the last bits and pieces and make sure that all the bags are packed. So I've got all of these practical things that have to be ticked off the to-do list before I can really start to let it sink in. I think when I get my eyebrows done next week, that's when I'll know I'm going.
All the important things.
The necessities, honestly.
Look, Kerrie, thanks very much for joining us ahead of the Tokyo Paralympics in the next few weeks. Looking forward to seeing you over there and competing. And thanks very much, and best of luck.
No problem. Thanks.